interviews. The only way is the right way, I might say. Nobody doing it better, y'all some lightweights. Malik Wright, up all day and all night, pushing all the buttons up to something till it's alright. He looking at it from all sides and angles, got a stripes on his body like he played for the Bengals. Oh man, there's no one discussing it. They came, they stayed, they either did it or done it. Man, I love it, cause all they ever do is win. So kick back, relax, the team WSN.
Thank you guys for joining me for another episode of the Sit Down with Malik Wright morning show presented by the Wright Way Sports Network. I'm your host, Malik Wright. I've got Daniel running the ones and twos today. A lot of stuff to get into, a lot of stuff to talk about. But before we do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content. Our good friend over here at TWSN, Parker Blake, will also be joining me on today's show. A lot of stuff to get into, though. And I think there's no better way to start it by saying the Bengals have issues. The Bengals have issues. And I'm at a point where, I think if you're trying to find a silver lining to some degree, you're hoping the offense the last 2 weeks have found their rhythm. That's what you're hoping for. However, after I went live yesterday, I did a little more, deep digging, if you will. Although the offense was efficient yesterday for the most part, going 2 for 4 in the red zone is not ideal. It's less than ideal. You expect those guys to punch that in. But none of that even matters if your defense can't get a stop. None of it matters if your defense can't get a stop. And those were some of the problems that plagued the Bengals. When I look at it and we answer that main question, what are the Bengals' issues? Well, I feel like it's a loaded question. It's a loaded question. I think it comes down to philosophy. I think it comes down to roster construction to some standpoint. I think it's making sure that you retain your good players, no matter even if they had a down year. I think those are the things that are important. And we can't have this conversation without looking at Duke Tobin. We can't have this conversation without looking at the Blackburns. We can't have this conversation without addressing some key free agents we've seen leave out the last years. I don't care about an agent, whether that be Jesse Bates, DJ Reader. Can't have this conversation without addressing the elephant in the room. We talked months ago about the importance of, keeping a championship roster together. This is the interesting part, right? We've seen the Bengals go to the Super Bowl. We've seen the Bengals go to AFC Championship. But the true measure of a ownership, of a front office that can handle things is how you navigate a Super Bowl window. And I'll be honest with you guys, I feel like the Bengals have had some big missteps. For that, I can't blame a defensive coordinator. For that, I can't blame an offensive coordinator. For that, I have to blame the front office. For that, I have to blame the head coach, because these are the people that are making those decisions. You hope that the head coach is listening to his coordinators and they're making sound decisions based on that. And he's the voice for them. And he's basically telling the front office, here's what we need. Listen, Lou made no qualms about it. He said, we want to keep DJ Reader. Lou made no qualms about it. He said, we need to keep Jesse Bates in the fold. These are guys that he was very adamant that he wanted the Bengals to keep. Now, your job as the coach is you can only coach the players that you're given. Here's the one thing I'll say. Well, one of many things I'll say. I know a lot of people are out there with their torches and they're saying, fire Lou. That's all I hear right now. Fire Lou, fire Lou, fire Lou. But I have a different thought on that. While the defense played putrid last night, I'm not going to fire the guy that showed that if you give me above average talent on the defensive side of the ball, guess what? I can win with that. He's shown that consistently. Help get this offense out of a lot of trouble. For me, the issue speaks to something bigger. The slow starts. All right. The slow starts are real. Not only do I think the slow starts are real, I think the inability to field a sufficient offense against teams like the New England Patriots is a problem. Listen, I have more thoughts and more things that I can say regarding this, and I'm going to get to all of that. But I want to make sure that I bring Daniel in on the conversation, bring Parker in on the conversation. So make sure you guys do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications. Daniel, what say you before we bring Parker in?
Yeah, I think one of my biggest gripes, and we discussed this on yesterday's live show, really is the front office, and it's the mismanagement of talent. And this, once again, is a show where you are going to get our opinions, and we are going to be real. And in my opinion, we said heading into the season, the biggest issue that I saw that could really plague this Bengals team was their defensive line, right? And the reason why I say that is you have to look at these other teams. What are the other contending teams looking like? And how do you shape your team into being one of those teams? You look at last year's Final Four in the playoffs, right? You look at the Baltimore Ravens, their front seven, absurd. The Chiefs had a great front seven. You look at the Lions, absurd front seven. You look at the 49ers, absurd front seven. And you look at what the Bengals did, and it really is, they are slow to change. And yes, Miles Murphy is the guy that they are putting their hopes in. I think that he can be that guy. But it really is an issue, in my opinion, if you're saying, hey, we got Trey Hendrickson, and besides that, we're not going to add a ton to this team on the defensive line. That is my biggest concern. You go look at the defensive line, you let DJ Reader walk out the door, and you replace him. Yes, Sheldon Rankins. Yes, Chris Jenkins. But it doesn't seem like there's a huge sense of urgency. It seems like this Bengals team is thinking 5-10 years in advance. And while at some point that can be a good thought process, and at some point that can be a good notion, at some point you got to look at the now. And I think that's the biggest discrepancy of this Bengals team is they are, and we discussed this yesterday, Malik, they are figuring out, hey, we made the Super Bowl, so we can make the Super Bowl with this team. And I do believe that this roster, as it currently is, can push for a Super Bowl. But are you going to be complacent and just let that happen? Or are you going to be one of these organizations that goes out and makes a trade, that goes out, makes a big signing? And that's the frustrating part. And yes, I am looking at it from a very narrow standpoint right now, but it pisses me off. It pisses me off to look at these other franchises and these other teams and see them go out and make these big time splashes, see them go out and make a big change. Hey, see them at 0-3 or at 1-2 go out and make an acquisition. Or even last year, many teams went out and they said, hey, let's go and shake some shit up. You look at their defensive line, you look at some teams, you look at the Lions when the rookie season with Brian Branch, they just let him play right out the gate. And they said, hey, we trust the talent that you have, and we're going to let you play. And that's the frustrating part, Malik, is it feels like they are very complacent right now and saying, hey, this roster as it currently is, we're going to let it roll. You look at the Bengals, it seems like the weapons. It seems like they head into this year saying we will figure out Jamar Chase later. T. Higgins, hopefully if we win a Super Bowl, we can let him go, but we're not going to re-sign him right now. And it's a very interesting thought process. And the same thing, Malik, you got Jermaine Burton on your team and you're not playing him. You got Jordan Battle on your team and you're not playing him. So my biggest gripe is definitely with the front office, I would say. But at the end of the day, coaches got to coach and the players got to play. And the coaching side of things, you lost 3 games by, 3 points? The Chiefs game was 1 point. This game was 3 points. The first game was close game. And
this was
5. And at the end of the day, this was a 2-possession game. They scored at the end. So it's like, it's not like this game was close, but it's like you're losing these 1-score games. And at some point, this is the same conversation I had with the Ravens. At some point, you got to look at the coaching. You got to look at the head coach, whether it's late game management or you got to figure this out. But like I said, I think the personnel on defense and the late game management, just overall the game planning, it seems like this team just comes out flat time and time again. So
You know, um, I'm gonna add on to that. Before we do, I want to make sure we get our guy Parker Blake in on the conversation. So without further ado, Parker, welcome to the show, my man.
Morning, fellas. How we doing?
Good, man. 10 feet tall and bazooka proof. Pretty pumped up for today's show. Appreciate you being on, man, with me as well. So again, we're talking about the Bengals issues that they have and how we feel like they stem much deeper than just the roster you field. But here's the one thing I'll say, Parker. I don't want the fan base to revert back to simply targeting a coordinator. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's fair. I think that the head of the operation needs to be discussed a lot more than what we do. It can't just be a fire Lou thing and then we expect everything to get better. That's not how it works. It's very difficult for me to go out there and hold a torch and say fire this guy when you look at who he's been handed. You look at the players he's been handed. And when I say the players he's been handed, I'm talking about, you replace DJ Reader with Sheldon Rankins, who was, for the most part, a backup through the most of his career, or a guy that came into pass rush situations, was really never the guy anywhere. I mean, the Texans gave him a more, a bigger role, but outside of that didn't, that wasn't something that was consistent necessarily. Even with the Jets, he came in on specialized situations and wasn't seeing most of the snaps, and he wasn't looked as the guy that's going to anchor that defensive line if he was. Well, I guess he can't be when we have Quentin Williams either. But you look at it, man. Some of the holes that this roster has experienced, there's so much that went into this Bengals team showing what they have recently. And I think that, while we talk about, trade for this player or be aggressive in the sense, like you were in a situation where you didn't have to be necessarily. You let good players, great players walk out the door, guys like Jesse Bates. And I saw someone saying, hey, you know what? Jesse Bates was always going to leave. Well, I can tell you right now, I don't agree with that sentiment. I believe that he always wanted to stay here in Cincinnati. I believe that was something that was on the forefront of his mind. He was a true leader. He spoke to how he wanted to bring a championship to Cincinnati and how he wanted to play his career in Cincinnati. For God's sakes, his family lived in Indiana. I mean, I don't believe that at all. I believe that, he didn't play up to the expectations that the Bengals wanted him to versus the money he was asking for, and that guy walked out the door. So every player has a situation surrounding him as to why they may have not worked out here in Cincinnati. But I want to hear what your thoughts are, man. What are your thoughts on the issues of the Bengals? What do you think is stemming to these slow starts? But more importantly, what do you think is stemming to the Bengals being 0-3 right now?
Yeah, no, I think first and foremost, you have to address the slow starts at some point. And that really just comes down to a lack of preparation. Whatever way you want to slice it, when you're coming out of the gate 0-2 consistently every year with the talent that you've been able to field with this team, it's just unacceptable. I don't care who you play. I don't care how much preseason you got. There's plenty of teams that are able to get out here and get off to a hot start, even though I've always been a guy that said, I'd much rather be hot November, December through January into February. I mean, you got to start off hot. You can't get in this hole early. You can't expect to go on 15-game winning streaks. You can't expect to go on a 10, 11, 12-game winning streak every year. It's just not going to happen in this league. Some guys can do it. Some teams can do it, but you can't do it consistently. And when you're starting off every single year, almost assuming now that you can just go 0-2 to start the year, you can just start week 3 and hope that you can grab a win. This year, now you're 0-3. And we haven't really gotten into the meat of the schedule right now. I mean, this is a 4th place schedule. This is one of the easier schedules in the league, just based on how they finished last year. And you're dropping games. I know it's the NFL and there's no game you should win, but they're dropping games that they should have expected to win. Mm-hmm. They're dropping games against teams that don't have the same level, like even similar levels of talent on the field as the Bengals. And there's just, I've heard a lot of, people in my mentions over the last couple of years talking about, fire this coach because players aren't panning out, fire this coach because players aren't panning out. And it's interesting to me to see, then now it's on the players on the defensive side. You got to look at why aren't these draft picks taken off? Is it because they're bad draft picks? Because then if that's the case, you got to address the people that are handling those decisions. If it's because of it's bad player development, then you have to handle the people managing that, handling those decisions. So you have to really, when you're in a spot like this where you're consistently starting 0-2, now you're 0-3, you have to look at the process. And that's where I love what Joe Burrow said as far as, I have to reevaluate how I am as a leader. It's always an issue I've really silently had, where it's you can't just sit in the locker room and be a lead by example guy when you're the leader on the team. You can't just sit there and expect people to follow you around. I mean, that works positionally, that works, again, as if you're kind of those smaller role leaders on the team. But when you're the guy, you have to find a way to set the standard and hold the standard for your team. And again, I think that's a great way of starting to show like, hey, let's look at some of the internal processes we have going on. How did we get here? That's the question that the organization needs to ask itself, whether it's coaching, whether it's player management, whatever it might be. But how did we get here?
Yeah, I think that's a very real question. I think that you explained that so beautifully, by the way, Parker. Only way Parker Blake can do, of course. But yeah, man, I like what you talked about in terms of blaming a positional coach, because I feel like this was the same rhetoric that was kind of spewed before. I feel like this was the same, fire Lou, fire Lou, fire Lou, when the issue was much bigger. How many games did Lou and his defense keep the offense in when the offense was sputtering? My issue is, hear me out. You bring in an offensive-minded coach to do what? Run the offense, right? To grow with his young quarterback. And it's been anything but that. I feel like the quarterback has been his best when he's been allowed to play his game, essentially, where he's allowed to call the plays. There isn't a lot of that. There isn't I could see if the Bengals were scoring 30 plus a game, then I'm like, okay. But, I look at it, well, people are like, well, the offense wasn't the issue tonight. Well, that's an issue in itself, right? Because here's the thing. You would hope that they wouldn't be an issue against the worst secondary in football. You would hope that they'd be able to go up and down the football field. You would hope that they would, almost have a perfect red zone completion, which they didn't. They went 2 for 4 in the red zone. You would hope so. But even when I jump on here and I talk about it and I say, the personnel decisions down in the red zone were confusing to me. Why Mike Gesicki was not in, on those red zone snaps were confusing to me. Why you were trying to force the run up the gut, knowing if there is any area on this Washington Commanders defense that they're stout at, it's going to be with Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen. I just didn't understand the logic behind it. To me, there was some real, there was some real bone-headed or head-scratching plays in there, man, that didn't allow them to punch it in. They should have put up a lot more points than what they did, right? Obviously, you have the miscues with Evan McPherson missing the field goal, but against, you're the Bengals. You're the high-powered Bengals offense, and this is what we kind of talked about before, Park. I believe it was like week 1 or week 2 we talked about. I was like, we laud this offense for being so high-powered, but I'm still waiting for the high-poweredness to show up consistently.
Yeah.
Right? And not just against bad secondaries. Like, you're supposed to be dominating at this point. And it feels like, I don't know, it feels like the energy right now around this team is very different. It feels very, very different. It feels like I'm not sure if what's gotten them out of this funk in the past is going to be something that's going to help them get out of it now. Daniel, what are your thoughts though?
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. And I think when you go and look at how this team, once again, I think Parker, you also made a great statement about it's about the process. And I think that's what this Bengals team has to go out and reevaluate, right? It's not necessarily about, sure, we can discuss and we have to discuss the talent on this team, but this has been a common theme with this team, right? It has been the slow starts. It has been the late game management. The one thing I go back to, and this is a lot of the questions, about the Jordan Battle or about the Jermaine Burton, is your use of your young talent. What is your philosophy, right? Are we just waiting to play these guys? Are we giving these guys, long leashes? What are we doing with these young guys, right? And that's kind of goes to the player development part, to where the guys you've drafted, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, those were 2 bona fide top 5 guys. Besides that, I mean, T. Higgins has turned out great, and he was a early second round pick. But besides that, right? What are we doing to develop the talent, right? The Dax Hill statement. So many of these players, and you just hope, especially with the two young guys that we can pinpoint, is Jordan Battle and Jermaine Burton, because I'm confident. And Malik, I know we've discussed this. You're an Alabama Crimson Tide fan. Both guys played at Alabama. And Parker, I know you've been on record saying you're big fans of these guys. Like, what are we doing? What's the game plan with these young players and developing these players? So there's a lot of issues with this team, and I really do think it comes down to even the mindset. But like, I look at yesterday's game, for example, the first drive, and the Bengals came out hot, and it's like, holy shit, this offense is back, right? We're good. This is the team we were waiting for, and it slowly seemed like, and maybe this is just from seeing it on TV. Jaden Daniels had a swag. This offense, they didn't fear the Bengals, and then on the defense side, the Commanders, I mean, they got mollywopped their defense, but they held up. So it just seemed like the Bengals lost their confidence midway through. It didn't seem like this was the Bengals game to lose. It seemed like it was the Commanders game. They were playing with house money, and they took it to the Bengals. And quite frankly, the Bengals did not look like the more prepared team, especially on defense, but even on offense. And yeah, man, it's frustrating.
Here's the important thing to remember when we're talking this thing through, man. This isn't about, for me at least, it isn't about just one game. This isn't about one game. This is in totality. This is something that has been rearing its ugly head over and over and over again. Let's talk about if we're going to pinpoint, if we're going to scapegoat someone, or we're going to scapegoat a position group after yesterday, we can 100% look at the defense. The defense was to blame for today's loss. But guess what? The same areas are issues that we said we felt like the defense would have, right? In terms of the interior of the defensive line, the fan base knew that was going to be issues. Everyone could look at the Bengals and know that was going to be issues. Somehow the front office, who gets paid millions of dollars to do their job, looked at it and said, well, it's fine. We can win with what we have. So I think that's a bigger issue in itself. Believing that players are going to automatically become something that they haven't been is interesting. But, we're going to keep the conversation going. If you guys can do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content from TWSN. Let's move on over to Zach Taylor, Danny, if we can. It's time to ask that question. Is Zach Taylor holding the Bengals back? And with Zach Taylor, that means the staff as a whole, right? What are your thoughts, Parker?
Yeah, no. Like you brought up, Zach Taylor was brought in to bring on a young quarterback and develop that quarterback, develop this offense, and create kind of this explosive offense that Bengals fans have an image of in their heads. Something that I've talked about for a few years now. Is explosive offenses can put up 30 points a game. This Bengals offense has struggled to score 30 points. I don't know they did this week again against a team that they should have scored 50 points against. So that's not necessarily a hat tip to them. But you have to be able to score 30 points a game to win in the NFL. You can't be in the 20s range. You can't be sitting at 28, 25, 23, 21 in games and expect to consistently win throughout the league. You're going to get other offenses that you're going to get into shootouts with that you have to be able to compete with. And I think my issue with this offense for a long time has been the red zone production. I think it's been pitiful. And you can even, add in short yardage production, whether it's 4th and 1s, it's those conversions, those late conversions, it's the 3rd and shorts. They just seem to outthink themselves, overthink these situations and get in their own way. And that's where you have to be able to find the end zone when you're in the red zone. You have to be able to get to that 30-point mark. I mean, you have to do some of these basic things where the standard for this offense shouldn't be 1 touchdown a quarter. We're getting 28 points. We got to win that game. The standard for this offense should be near perfection. If you think that we have the offense that we have, that the talent that they've been able to roll out there with the Joe Burrow, with the Jamar Chase, with the T. Higgins, and now with a guy like Eric All Jr. stepping up, with a guy like Mike Gesicki that you brought on to add to the roster, you have the tools to be a very successful offense. And you're just, I don't know how you mismanage it like this. I mean, there's been plenty of situations that we've seen this offense get into where I do feel like, the Monday morning quarterbacks or the couch coaches, I mean, yeah, you're not there. You don't understand the personnel. You don't know what they're doing. You're not coaching in the NFL. But at the same time, I shouldn't be able to predict your offense. I mean, you go and watch some of these other NFL games, and it's like, oh wow, I mean this team just looks more exciting with less talent. I mean, you have teams out here that are doing more with less, and it feels like for some reason the Bengals have these buckets of gold in each hand and just can't find their way to get up the stairs. And it's crazy to me because I don't understand how you're just going to let all of this talent sit on the field and get to second, get to third contracts and just not address the fact that you have this guy on the staff still because you found your way to get out of your own way and get to a Super Bowl one year. You found a way to just let that talent go when it was still all the talent was still pretty new to the league. Teams were still trying to figure out how to handle these new age Bengals. They were trying to understand how to handle this new offense. And yeah, you got there. You experienced a great level of success, but what have you done since? I mean, that was how long ago now? You can't be resting on that after so many years. You can't give a long-term extension after 1 year of success when, yeah, he might not have had the greatest talent around him, but he did nothing with those other without Joe Burrow, he did nothing. Without Jamar Chase, what did he like? He did nothing. And so you have this guy that you hired with zero track record of success following him into the league. You brought him in for whatever reason when there was a myriad of great, coaching options. And it was because people probably just didn't want to come, which is, you have to battle that. You have to battle that too. You're making calls. People aren't answering the calls. That is what it is. But at the end of the day, you can't just, we're going to stick with this guy because he's just the guy we have. You have to hold your head coach to a certain standard, especially when you're fielding the talent you are. And that's been my biggest issue for a while. It feels like now where it's, you were brought in to overhaul this offense and you're just not even properly managing not only just your personnel in general, but the talent that you have available. You're just not utilizing. And that's what it just frustrates me at this point. Like I don't understand how we've gotten into this situation.
I agree, man. I think it's a very realistic, or not very realistic, a very real question to ask. I feel like there's a little bit of questions, when it comes to my feelings when it comes to Zach Taylor as a head coach. I don't doubt that Zach Taylor is a good culture fit in terms of, wanting to see this roster do well. But I do wonder if things get tough like this, if he can step up and be the leader that, to pull this team out of this hole. Throughout Zach Taylor's career, when he's been in spots like this, I've seen it end with him getting fired. I've seen it end with him not being able to pull his team out of the hole, whether that be at UC, whether that be in Miami in an interim role. He was blessed to be in a position he was in with the Rams, right? But I have not seen Zach Taylor with a talented team as this is, be able to pull this team out essentially. And I think that's going to be the interesting part. Daniel, what are your thoughts more on the Zach Taylor situation? Because I honestly, if someone asks me that question, is Zach Taylor holding the Bengals back? I have to say yes. I have to say yes. You feel that if you had, you think about it, you put a Kyle Shanahan, you put a lot of other people in this situation. What results are they producing? Now, again, that's a fairy tale world. We don't know necessarily, but we can assume based upon the talent that we've seen them work with versus the talent that's on this team. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway, and I can definitely go and we can discuss how this team has looked, right? Because this isn't just a one-game thing. Let's go look at the sample size. And I think a lot of it can do with even just getting your guys up for games. You look at that Chiefs game, right? And yes, this is me making a total assumption, but the players were ready to go for that game. And they knew what was at stake, right? That was a playoff atmosphere. Everybody knew. And how does that team, quite frankly, I'm sorry, the team that stepped out on that field against the Chiefs was a completely different team that stepped out on the field week 1 and was a completely different team that stepped out on week 3. And yes, maybe this offense, they looked good yesterday. They did, and they should have. It was against the Commanders. But how does that team look drastically different? It's got to fall in the coaching, Malik. It is, because the takeaway after week 2, at least from our show and what we were discussing, was they manhandled the Chiefs. They were in control of that game. And then you go and get manhandled by the Commanders. And this is a constant theme. You go, what was the stat? 1-9 in the first 2 weeks for Zach Taylor era. That is not a fluke. That's not. And that's not to say he's a terrible coach, but that's where I'm having trouble trying to pinpoint it. And it's frustrating because it's at some point that has to be on the coaching, because that is a repeated cycle time and time again. You go look at, once again, I hate bringing up other coaches, but other situations aren't having that issue. You go look at the Buffalo Bills, what they did, right? Their biggest issue, and remains to be seen, is the playoffs. But this offseason, they figured out, all right, let's go and shake shit up. Let's go shake our defense coordinator. Let's go shake our coaching staff up. And the biggest thing that, at least in my opinion, I think we were all on the same page, was, hey, consistency is a great thing in a coaching staff. It is. You go look at teams that dealt with an injury. Go look at Jimmy Garoppolo the year after he got injured. They had the same head coach, same defense coordinator, same offense coordinator. They went to the Super Bowl the following year. You go look at Aaron Rodgers with the Packers. He got injured the year after. Same head coach, same defense coordinator, same offensive coordinator. They went to the NFC Championship. And you look at this team, they've got the consistency. You got Dan Pitcher, who's still in the building. You got Lou Anarumo, who's still in the building. You got your quarterback, who is still in the building, and you can't get it done. So
let me touch on this really quickly. I'll say this. I'll see Bengals fans ask the question. I appreciate the question too. What ? Zach Taylor is at fault. Hudson. Is it Zach Taylor's fault? Hudson fumbled 1 yard out. Gesicki's call in the end zone. You guys are unreasonable. Saying it's Zach's fault for the 4th and 16 week. Come on. It could be just as easily be 3-0. Okay, let's have that conversation. Number one, I'll be honest with you. I approach that. I appreciate that. I'm sorry if you don't like us being honest and having the conversation. Aussie, but here's what I will say, man. You pointed out to specific issues. You pointed out the 4th and 16 call, which was obviously in hindsight, bang, bang, whatever. Like that was, he did get there a little early, made sense why they call that. I'm talking a larger issue. I'm talking about personnel decision makings. I'm talking about not playing some of your talented guys like Jermaine Burton. That's what the conversation I'm having. We're talking about a guy that was brought in to be the offensive-minded coach to bring the best out of this offense and has yet to do that consistently. When the Bengals were at their best, when they were playing backyard football, we have not seen them be able to scheme up consistently and put 30 points, put even 25 points plus a game on a team's head. Somebody has to answer for that. Now, you want to talk about the defense, and we can have that conversation. But here's the thing. When we talk about the defense, we can't just look at Lou. Because here's the thing. We've seen what Lou does when he does have above average talent in here. Guys like Larry Ogunjobi, like BJ Hill, when DJ Reader was here. Here's my thought process. What defensive coordinator in the NFL right now, or not in the NFL right now, what defensive-minded coach are you bringing in here that's going to do a better job than what Lou has done with what he's been given? I'll wait. And that's, to me, where the conversation starts and it ends a little bit. Because hear me out. 15 of 15 for Jaden Daniels, right? When he wasn't blitzed. That's atrocious. And only blitzing a few times in the game, that's atrocious. That's a critical error that I can look at and I could say that was bad. That was bad from a coaching standpoint. You got to do something to simulate pressure to get more on these offenses and get these quarterbacks down. I'm 100% there with you on that. You can point to the mismanagement at the end of the game for the Chiefs game where you put Dejon Anthony in there versus a Jordan Battle or whoever you can insert in there. Putting that on a rookie defensive back was another critical coaching error. But outside of those critical coaching errors, which Lou doesn't usually have, I think respectfully, what other defensive coordinator is going to come in here with the talent that he's been given and get the most out of this defense? We've seen Steve Spagnuolo for years have issues in Kansas City, and I keep him on board. There were years where the Kansas City defense was like a fence, and they kept him on board because when they needed to make critical stops, they made critical stops. I saw somebody say earlier, his Lou's defense is predicated on turnovers. Well, so was Matt Patricia's in New England. Bend but don't break defense. Well, what happens when you start breaking? And what happens, at least outside of last night was putrid all around, especially on the defensive side of things. But what happens quite often is, the Bengals will play bend but don't break defense, and then the offense doesn't answer. Well, you can only play bend but don't break defense for so long before the levee breaks. I don't know. And I think that we should probably switch over to the Bengals defense conversation now, Danny, if we can. And, I think that being honest about this assessment, I think being honest about this situation is important. The question is, how can the Bengals fix their defense? I talked about it last night. I don't know if there's an answer walking through this door. I think right now you're hoping that guys like BJ Hill, guys like Sheldon Rankins get healthy, to where they can start to add to this football team. That's what my thought process is. And I'll be honest with you, Parker, I liked what I saw out of Chris Jenkins last night. I saw a lot of promise there. And I think that maybe him, McKinley Jackson, BJ Hill, and Sheldon Rankins can form, a pretty good pass rush or pressure inside the defense to help make life easier for these edge rushers and guys in the back end. I believe that. But what happens when when you don't have that right now, when you have two of those guys out right now? I don't know. To me, I think that there are some areas of focus, the things that could help fix this defense. Like, I'd like to see Jordan Battle out there more. I like to see that. I like to see Jordan Battle out there more. But at the end of the day, that's got to be something that the coaching staff looks at themselves and says, hey, you know what? We're probably better with this guy than we aren't. Whatever reason, that guy's not playing. But Parker, what are your thoughts on how the Bengals can fix their defense?
Yeah, no, I mean, first and foremost, I think a lot of people are going around, whether it's last night, today, throughout the rest of the week, they're going around whether it's social media or podcasts, and they feel like this is overreactions to the 0-3 start. This is overreactions to what have you done for me lately. And that's where I got to reiterate, like these are things that we've seen, right? We've seen a lot of these issues in previous seasons. This isn't something that we're just like, oh, well, would this be different if they were 3-0? I mean, first off, yeah, it'd be different. They'd be 3-0. And then you'd have win over the Chiefs. You'd have 2 wins that you expected to get. You're coming to the season a lot stronger. You got through the slow starts at the beginning of the year. But I had to talk about that. I just feel like this isn't an overreaction to what have you done for me lately. At least for me, this is stuff that I've seen for a long time and I've talked about for a while. I have a lot of excitement for what this defensive line room can bring, and there's a lot of hate for it. Everyone wants to go and make these signings. I mean, you're missing BJ Hill, you're missing Chris Jenkins, you're missing McKinley Jackson, who I know there was a lot of split on throughout the draft process, but it's a guy that I have a lot of excitement for as far as especially as a run stopper, but I think he brings some pass rush juice as well. Mm-hmm. Chris Jenkins is a guy that was playing with one hand last night, and I don't know why he didn't get in until middle of the third quarter, but when he got in, I thought he showed a lot of good flashes. I think the biggest thing that they're missing right now is Myles Murphy. You hear a lot of people talking about, Sam Hubbard this, Sam Hubbard that, let's move on from Sam Hubbard. There's no one to move to right now because Myles Murphy's the guy. That's the plan. And he's just not healthy right now. He won't be healthy next week either. He's not going to be back. He's not going to be back till week 5. So you just have to live with what you have there. That's maybe you want to see a Cedric Johnson get in there. You want to see them more effectively use the personnel that they have in the room, but they just haven't been able to. And that's where you can trash the defensive line, especially the defensive interior, all you want. But I think there's 4 guys that they were planning on, getting a majority of these reps, and 3 of them weren't even active last night. And one of them didn't get reps until way late in the game. And that's I think the bigger question for me. If you're limiting Chris Jenkins, I understand that. And maybe that's something you have to live with. But if you realize you're deficient with personnel in any grouping, you have to do something to make up for that. You have to run more simulator pressures. You have to run more blitzes. You have to run stunts, run games up front, and get these guys free. Find ways if they're going to slide to Trey Hendrickson on every single snap because that's the way to shut down this pass rush. Then you're going to be able to bring free pressure off the backside. Maybe you run stunts with Hendrickson and get him onto the interior on a guard. If he's going to handle these tackles, especially these unproven tackles, how do you think he's going to handle an interior offensive lineman, even if he's a solid player? I mean, I think those are the issues I have. And I think we can all agree there's personnel problems, but I think the lack of development that we've seen out of some of these guys, and then now that you're not able to use a lot of the guys that I hope were the plan going in to be a majority of those snaps, then you have to find a way to adjust. You have to find a way to make these players effective. You can't just say, oh, well, our D-line's not going to be good. We're just going to have to, live with that. And I mean, I guess dropping 7's great, but if you're not getting pressure and you got a guy like Jaden Daniels, we play Lamar Jackson. The Bengals played Lamar Jackson twice a year. And so if you're just going to let a guy, I understand it's a rookie, maybe you just were hoping you could force him into bad decisions, but when you see that he's willing to put the ball in his own hands and go make plays and be an effective playmaker, you have to adjust. You can't allow him to have time. You can't allow him to have these free rushing lanes. You have to find a way to speed up his clock. His time to throw was over 3 seconds last night, and that's uncalled for. That's blasphemous, honestly.
Yeah. Daniel?
Yeah, I think when you look at this team, and once again, that's why we can pinpoint. I do pinpoint yesterday's loss is definitely a issue, and Lou Anarumo definitely has, could have done some different things, but then that's not the biggest issue with this team. And when we're discussing this defense line, I think that's a great point you brought up, Parker. Is the injuries to the interior defensive line is. Like, you weren't expecting BJ Hill to be out. You weren't expecting Sheldon Rankins to be out. You weren't expecting, Chris Jenkins to even be out. So I think that it definitely gives the defense a lot more leeway. And the same thing, you look at the personnel, right? The Bengals head into the season knowing Sam Hubbard and Miles Murphy were their other edge rushers opposite Trey Hendrickson. And I think, once again, that was another great point. This wasn't an overreaction. This was last year. Last year, the same exact issues. You go look at the 49ers game. You go look at some of these other games where it was like that game could have been lost because of the other edge rusher opposite of Trey Hendrickson. You weren't getting any pressure. And I think that's what it comes down to is this organization, it looks like for the defensive line, they are banking on Miles Murphy. And he's your first round pick, so rightfully so. You definitely can. The issue that I have with that from an organizational standpoint is, hey, you may be banking on this guy for the future, but if you're trying to win a Super Bowl now, is that the best route to go? So
For sure.
once again, I think that when I look at this defense, I think that they will get it together. That was the issue is why was this game plan so different from a Lamar Jackson? Why did they not pressure? I don't think that has to do. I don't think that that's going to withstand the entire season. I think that this defense will be able to turn it around. But it's going to come down to just more urgency. The only guy, respectfully, that really showed, obviously Trey Hendrickson had his nice flashes. Jermaine Pratt made a couple big-time plays, and yes, he wasn't really consistent in coverage, but that was the only guy where I really looked at and said, hey, the forced fumble that obviously they recovered, but he was out there being the same Jermaine Pratt, trying to make a big-time play. Besides that, it wasn't a whole lot of big plays. And the one big play was at the end of the game when they sent the house and Mike Hilton had a huge hit in Jaden Daniels. And that was a beautiful, perfect throw. But once again, you can't put yourself in that position. So how can they fix their defense? I think it really is a Miles Murphy or bust on the edge rusher side. Yeah. And the interior defense line, I'm not.
You just got to get healthy. I mean, you got to get healthy. I mean, in terms of what you have, right? There's not going to be something walking through there. I mean, you're a little more optimistic than I am, I would say. But I still think that there are some positives that can be had when you get some of those guys back, like BJ Hill, like a Sheldon Rankins.
And real quick, just discussing, like Bengals fandom said, did they spy Jaden Daniels? They did very good against him on the run. Obviously, he had a couple first downs. The dude only rushed for 39 yards, and he didn't. And there were a lot of spot plays where he snuck out for 5 to 6 yards. But they did a pretty good job. It seemed like their game plan was to let him drop back and dice him up, and that's where the issue was. So he didn't dominate them on the ground. It was really just through there. He just picked them apart.
And we appreciate our good friend Parker Blake joining us on the show as well. Make sure you guys give this video a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We have over almost 200 people watching us live right now, and Only 34 likes. You guys can get the likes up. We greatly appreciate it, and be a friend of this channel as well. We are live almost every single day. Tomorrow is State of the Jungle at 7 p.m. with me and the guys, and then I'm live every day, such as Thursday and Friday, talking everything through. Parker, let's get to how the Bengals move forward, how this team can move forward, and I appreciate you joining me on the show too, my man. But can the Bengals, break beyond this 0-3 start? Can they dig themselves out of a hole? Parker, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think they have the talent to do it.
Mhm.
They do, and that's the fact of the matter. I think making sure that this staff utilizes that and maximizes that, I think, has yet to be seen. But we've seen what can happen. We've seen them be able to do it in the past, and so if they're able to get out there, I think this is the best offensive line, like we've said every year, that's been in front of Joe Burrow. It's the best offensive line as far as the run game is concerned. I mean, they're able to lean on the run if they want to in those situations where arguably they need to. And then
Mhm.
Joe Burrow has time to sit back there. I think there were situations last night where you saw Joe Burrow drop back and start getting happy feet, and then he had enough time to not only get the happy feet, but then recompose himself and say, "Oh wow, like I'm free right now. I have time to make a decision." Especially at the end of the game, I think you saw that kind of him get worked up in the moment, expect that pressure, and he was able to drop back, and he sat there, was able to make some quality throws. And I think, this offense has shown fans what it can be. This team has shown fans what it can be. I mean, the Bengals played the Chiefs down to the wire,
Mhm.
in week 2. And I think that says a lot about, again, like we talked about earlier, just the process. Get back to the process. Why can you play the Chiefs down to the wire, but then when you feel dominated by the Patriots in week 1 and you feel like you just can't handle the Commanders' offense in week 3? Like there haven't been significant changes on any of those fronts in any of those games. Those have been 3 of the same games personnel wise. So where are your issues coming from? How can you address those issues? I do think it's getting the rookies involved. I hate that we're carrying some of these rookies to their second contract without really even seeing who they are at this point. I have to see a guy like Jordan Battle get in there and see what he can do for his defensive back end. I think that's where you struggle the most in week 3.
Yeah.
I would love to see a guy like, but yeah, sure, get Jermaine Burton more reps, get him in the rotation, roll out some different personnel packages, and have some fun with all the personnel you have on offense. You have 3 tight ends you feel really good about. You have a handful of receivers that you can throw out there and show different looks with. Like, just start doing more with the people you have. I think the biggest thing moving forward for me is just personnel management. Get the guys on the field that can make plays, that will make plays, and that can impact your team in a positive way. Don't just settle for whether it's the veteran presence, whether it's the guys you're comfortable with.
Mhm.
Like be okay to get outside of your box. You're 0-3. Currently, there's nothing to lose. Currently, there's no reason to not shake something up. Kind of like you guys said earlier, in relevance to coaching staff. I'm not saying they should shake up the coaching staff, but I'm saying with your personnel, start trying some different guys out. See what they can do. The worst case scenario right now is you get some of these younger players, whether it's rookies or guys on rookie deals, on the field, and if they make great plays for you, then now we can all celebrate because now we have not only a good playmaker, but now we have a young guy that we can hope to retain for the future. So that's how I see them. That's got to be the plan the rest of the season. That's got to be.
Agreed, Danny.
Yeah, I think the one positive, and we discussed this yesterday. I think one of our people in the comments. Once again, we appreciate you guys. Make sure you guys just drop some comments, and we'll get you guys questions. They haven't played a divisional game, and I think that's the silver lining I'm taking away. Is this season is not over. And yes, so the stat is there's been 6 teams, Malik, since 1979 that have made the playoffs after starting 0-3. So it doesn't look good statistically wise, but that's also without taking into account the 17 games. And when I look at this team, you go look at the division, the Ravens are 1-2. Yes, that is 1 game ahead of the Bengals, but they also play the Bills next week, and they also play the Bengals the next week. And it really, in my opinion, is going to come down. You control your destiny. As crazy as that sounds, the Bengals still control their destiny.
Mathematically,
yes. but yeah, yes, completely. But let's say there is a world where if you go and sweep the Steelers, you're still in this. And the Ravens, once again, it's not like they don't have their own issues. They barely, they shouldn't be 1-2. They could very well be 0-3. So I think that's the silver lining is the same thing we discussed heading to the season is take care of your own grass before you cut anybody else's.
There we go. There we go.
I'm using your
You
analogy.
got it out. Let's
I'm
go.
using your analogy. And that's the same thing that you could be here, right? It's you got to focus on your division before you even think about Super Bowl. And this division is still in reach. The Browns look like a shit show. The Ravens have their own issues, and the Steelers are the concern, right? They're 3-0. Are they fool's gold?
Yes.
It remains to be seen. So, and if they are fool's gold, you have it in your control. You face them twice this year. So
I think that is important to note. You do still, everything is still in front of you. I think that's the one silver lining. Mathematically, everything is still in front of you. You're hoping to get some guys healthy. You're hoping to get some guys back, and you're hoping that you can make a serious run at these things. Here's the thing I want people to understand. There are no more, no game in the NFL is easy, but there are no more gimme games, if you will. Andy Dalton's going to come out to try to make a statement against this Bengals team. We know how his tenure ended here. We know how him and Zach Taylor have, ended here. And if I'm not mistaken, Andy Dalton is undefeated against the Bengals since he left Cincinnati. He was with the Cowboys. He beat us. He started. I think he started that game with the Cowboys. It's the year Dak Prescott hurt his foot. I think it was. They beat us. Then he went to who was he before there? Where was he before that?
he lost with the Saints. I don't know if he played in that game.
He may have. I'm not sure.
But besides that, they won the Cowboys game, and then
it was the Bears. The Bears is the game that he started.
Yep.
So, at the end of the day, Andy Dalton's going to come out. Not even that's on the forefront of his mind, but obviously any extra added motivation that's probably going to be there. There's no more gimme games. There's going to be an opportunity for this team to beat this Panthers team. I can't even say anymore they should beat the Panthers team, but they've got to go out there and they've got to handle their business. Listen, at the end of the day, this Bengals team has everything in front of them, but it's important for them to stay within themselves. And right now, a lot of Bengals fans are upset. They're upset, and rightfully so, because the product has been less than stellar. We want you guys to drop some questions down in the comment section. We want to get to some of these questions before we head out of here. Make sure you guys give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or when we upload content. Daniel, can we get to some questions or even some comments?
Yeah, of course. So we had one from early on in the show. This was from Donovan Doing. He said, do you think Akeem Davis-Gaither should be getting more reps? He looked like he was flying around there and seems like he's one of the other options at linebacker.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of talked about this last night. Parker, I don't know if you agree or not, but I think it's easy to look at a guy like Akeem Davis-Gaither and say that, they look good when they have limited reps. He has looked good. Let me just say that. But, for a guy like Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt, when they're out there almost every single snap, their plays or their hiccups, their miscues are a little bit more magnified because we see them more often. Akeem Davis-Gaither has looked good. He looks like he's a guy that deserves more opportunity out there. I think that guy, I was high on him when he came out of App State. And I still think that he can become something very good in this league. This coaching staff loves him. Parker, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think he's a guy that falls into that bucket of younger talent that just needs more run. I think he's shown enough that you should be including him in sub packages. You should get him more volume on the field for sure, because I think that's where you really see, are the flashes just flashes that he's able to string together in limited reps, or is it just who he is as a player? And I think this is the time to find out.
Completely. We got a question from Blake Flynn. He was asking about the defense. He said, is it just me, or has Von Bell done absolutely nothing for this team so far?
I don't think Von Bell's looked good at all. I don't think it's just you. He asked another question too that it's kind of very interesting. Can you get to that?
Yeah, let me find it. He said, I've been pleading for all offseason, but has this season so far shown another need for another outside corner? I can't watch Dax Hill anymore.
Dax Hill's only looked bad in one big spot. I don't know where that came from. Dax Hill has been we have not mentioned his name often. I don't think that's a fair assessment at all. And it certainly doesn't hurt to have more corners, but you would hope that guys like DJ Turner, Cam Taylor, Britt, Dax Hill could be the guys to get the job done. They were all drafted with premium picks. So I don't. I disagree with that statement that Dax Hill has been terrible, or you're tired of watching Dax Hill. I don't think that's a fair assessment at all.
Yeah, completely. I would agree. And I think that, once again, I think people are going to pinpoint that final play of yesterday's game, and I don't think that that should be the case.
I mean, if you look at that play, like it was, no one thought he was going to throw that.
Mm-hmm.
The pressure was in his face. It almost seemed like they slowed up. Even Terry McLaurin looked like he had to, jolt a little bit more for, like, he was shot. It was almost very similar to what Cam Taylor-Britt said last night about who was he talking about? He was talking about Rashee Rice and how Rashee Rice beat him deep. He said they were just running for a long time. He didn't expect it, and it was just an absolute bomb down the field. And Blake Flynn says, I've seen a lot of missed tackles that should have been easy to me, especially as a safety coming down with the momentum. He's a corner now, but I'll say this: as well as we've seen missed tackles from everybody on the defense, but I've also seen him make plays as well. So I don't think that's fair to just single that guy out who's moving to a position and only his third game in.
We got a question from Gavin Lee. He said, do we fire Duke Tobin if Miles Murphy busts? He let DJ Reader and Jesse Bates walk.
There's no world in which I see Duke Tobin getting fired. Let me just say that.
Yeah. Question from Andrew Woods. He said, should we go to a 3 linebacker set instead of a 2 linebacker set?
Parker Blake.
I've been excited for that prospect for a long time, personally. I think going to a 3 linebacker set lets you be more flexible with that outside linebacker grouping. I think Logan Wilson's a fine middle linebacker. I think he can run that role extremely well. I think that lets you get Pratt off the field more often and get more athletic guys on the outside, in the outside linebacker role for passing situations. I think that allows you to be more flexible. I think with the defensive back 7 of this group, you have a lot of talent in there that you should be able to be more flexible with. Almost, the B flow method of success, where it's, hey, let's just get athletes, let's get them on the field, and situations where they can be effective. And that's where I think the 4-3 would be a much better situation for the Bengals to put themselves in. If there can be even a multiple 4-3 to 3-4 team, depending on scenario, I think that'd be great with how they're filling out this linebacker room. I don't think they're there to run a consistent 3 to 4 linebackers, but I think if they had a 4-3 set and that turned into their base, over the rest of the season or even into the next year, that would be great for the development of some of these younger linebackers and a great way to attack the draft and roster building for the direction this defense is headed, because that would help you in the run game immensely.
We got a question from Foul Mouth Fishman. He said,
I love the name, by the way. Foul Fishman. I'm going to change my name.
Me too, buddy. Me too.
Crazy name. He said, there's rumblings of losing the locker room. Are you hearing this, Malik?
No, I haven't heard that just yet, but I appreciate the question. I think that if you continue to lose, that could happen.
We got a question from Honey Dollars discussing the edge rushers. He said, do you think that they start Miles Murphy over Sam Hubbard when he comes back? Sam Hubbard looks done.
They need to. They need to. I think it would also be beneficial to try to move Sam Hubbard on the inside too. I think that you can do some interesting things with Sam Hubbard to try to alleviate the pressure. He doesn't have to only be on the edge. You know what I mean? And I think that's something he's been very reluctant to. He's been on record to being reluctant to do in the past. But let's see if they can maybe get the veteran to change his stripes a little bit there.
We had a question from James Angelis. He said, should we stop showing out at games until this team can deliver? Too much stadium participation for a losing team. We don't deserve an orange out only to lose at home.
No. Still support the team. Still show up. Still support the team. Still show out in droves. This team thrives. These players thrive off of fans showing up, supporting them. I'll never turn your back on this city or this team ever. I don't think the product's been up to par, but I still think that you have a lot of things to root for, a lot of things to be excited about. Joe Burrow's your quarterback. So, there's still a lot of stuff that's in front of you.
We had a question from Greg Oakley. He's discussing the defense and saying, what is going on with the constant inability to tackle? Is that a scheme thing, or do you think that's motivation? What do you think that is?
What do you think, Parker?
Yeah, no, it's an execution thing. Tackling is always an execution thing. I don't know what the offseason process looks like for, working on that. And that's a fundamental skill. There's plenty of teams that struggle to tackle. It is tough when it feels like everybody in your back sevens 50-50 on tackling at best at times. And that's where when you look ahead at the draft, there's a lot of physical talent that you can bring in, but I don't think they have holes in those areas. I think it's just cleaning up the fundamentals there. And again, get back to your process. Why are we struggling with tackling? What are we doing to address that concern in a week to week basis or throughout the offseason? That's where my concern lies there. But I think that's something that could really just come. Zach Taylor doesn't run a physical camp. He doesn't run a physical offseason program. Allow these guys to get in the groove of the season. I thought we saw some really solid, not only just tackling, but some solid hitting, in last night's matchups. I think it'll come around. I'm not worried about it yet.
Hey Parker, let's let you have your moment, man. Let's talk about the offensive line, because the offensive line looked damn good yesterday. It has looked damn good all season so far, and there are a lot of people out there that are just throwing it to the wall, saying, "Well, the offensive line is bad," and I just disagree on so many levels.
Yeah, no, it's been funny because people are just refusing to give them their flowers, which is okay. I understand that I'm the sympathizer of the fandom. It feels like at times, but that's all right. But it's been crazy to me to see that, like, last night we had problem XYZ. The defense did this. This player looked like this, and then the offensive line is just, I mean, I guess it's fine, whatever. And then they move on. But that's just not the case. This is a good group now. They've gotten a group, and I said from the beginning of the season, once you get Amarius Mims involved, and best wishes to Trent Brown. Hopefully it's nothing too crazy. Hopefully they come out of that half decent. But I think once you got Amarius Mims involved and moving down the stretch as he gets comfortable in the league, you have the potential to push for a top 10 unit. You have maybe not any high level talent in this group, but you have guys that are working well together. You have guys that can match up a little bit better. You have guys that can do a better job of hiding your deficiencies. Because I mean, you got a guy in Alex Kappa that people have been hammering, for some reason since the middle of last season. But if you look at his career in Tampa, he was playing between Ryan Jensen and Tristan Wirfs. He's playing between two extremely high level offensive linemen. Now you have him next to a guy like Ted Karras, and you've had him next to the revolving door of right tackles. He hasn't had the same right tackle. He's had multiple in a season, multiple times since he's been in Cincinnati. And so I think that's where he's going to be able to really develop a relationship. He worked with Mims a lot in the offseason. Mims was that guy throughout the offseason. I think we saw a lot of volume from Mims, and that was great. And so now seeing him come in, see them reconnect, get that chemistry going again. I think Orlando Brown and Cordell Volson have been impressive on the left side. I think Cordell Volson is here to stay. I think he has made that jump, and we've seen what he can be. And maybe it's not an all-pro caliber player, but it's a solid to above average player that I think is going to be in the city for a while. I think we're finally getting this group. I think we finally turned the corner that Joe Burrow has time to throw that. Even, like I said earlier, even he seems surprised that he has the time that he has, from play to play. And I think the run game is taking off, not only because you brought in higher quality backs. So you have a guy like Zach Moss that's able to get downhill. You have a guy like Chase Brown that's extremely explosive when he gets out of the gate, but you're creating some impressive running lanes. I mean, this group is here. And I think not giving them credit, whether it's because the defense sucked and we lost the game or whatever your thoughts might be, this group is here. And this is what Bengals fans have been clamoring for. And that's why I was frustrated last night going through the timeline, because not that, you should be singing any group's praises after a loss, especially like that. But don't just throw it to the side and be like, oh, it's fine, I guess. This is a good group, and I think they're going to be, relatively stable moving forward. And that's the most exciting thing to me.
I agree. Well, listen, we want to thank everybody for joining us for another episode of the Sit Down with Malik Wright Morning Show, presented by the Wright Way Sports Network, TWSN. Make sure you guys give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live. I also want to let y'all know something. I made a promise a couple weeks back. I said 4 Bengals fans will get the opportunity to join us in a suite for Bengals Giants. We have a suite. TWSN has a suite for the Bengals Giants game. And I want you guys to stay tuned to the channel, stay tuned to my social media, so you guys can get an opportunity to join us in MetLife in the suite for Bengals Giants. It'll be very, very interesting going down the stretch. We want to thank everybody for tuning in to another episode. We appreciate y'all for tuning in. We appreciate y'all for spending your mornings with me, the crew. And remember, there's only one way you should be waking up, talking sports, having the conversation, and that is the right way. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. I'll see you